นิเวศวิหารและวัดพระเชตุพนวิมลมังคลารามพลอากาศเอกสมบูรณ์ประหงษ์จะตัดสินใจว่าจะรับตำแหน่งหัวหน้าพรรคชาติไทยหรือไม่ในสัปดาห์หน้าจับคนร้ายสังหารหมู่พระสงฆ์ไทยที่สหรัฐระลอก2และชมบรรยากาศเปิดการประชุมสันติภาพตะวันออกกลางครั้งประวัติศาสตร์ที่ประเทศสเปน
สวัสดีค่ะข่าวภาค 19:30 น.
From San Francisco, here is the morning news with Bob Dunn.
The town of Vin Lin, just inside.
A hand clasp that sealed the bargain. For the first time in its 30 years, the state of Israel was at peace with one of its Arab neighbors.
From Washington, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Morton Dean in our newsroom in New York.
Good evening. Let history record that at 11 and a half minutes after 2...
The Mod Squad at 4, the FBI at 5, right here on WSB Television, Channel 2, Double Action.
Friday, January 23rd, Action News. Here's John Pruitt.
Good evening. A Hapeville man was killed today when a train...
Bosnian Serbs use UN troops as human shields, trying to prevent more NATO airstrikes. At the O.J. Simpson trial, and then there were 4. The pool of alternates dwindles as another juror is dismissed. And the president's nominee for Surgeon General stays alive on Capitol Hill.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Sitting in tonight, Forrest Sawyer.
Good evening. The United Nations struggled to impose peace in Bosnia-Herzegovina.
And Governor Dukakis campaigns through the night and through Election Day.
From the Decision 88 election headquarters in New York, NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. I'm here with our full team, Connie Chung, John Chancellor, and Garrick Utley. And before this night turns to day, the United States will have a new president-elect after one of the longest and most rancorous campaigns of the 20th century. All national...
Svetlana Stalin is hidden tonight somewhere...
Now on YTV, we take the ITN news from London at exactly 6:32.
Europe's golfers are celebrating an historic victory.
Headline News, I'm Don Harrison, sitting in for the vacationing Chuck Roberts.
Добрый вечер, товарищи.
Добрый.
Highlights from around the world. A celebration of the millennium. This is ABC 2000. With Peter Jennings at ABC 2000 headquarters in Times Square, Barbara Walters in Paris, Diane Sawyer in New York, Charles Gibson in London, Cokie Roberts in Rome, Elizabeth Vargas in Sydney, Connie Chung in Las Vegas, Deborah Roberts in Orlando, Jack Ford in Times Square, Carol Simpson in Chicago, and Sam Donaldson at the Y2K Command Center in Washington. With our correspondents spanning the globe in Shanghai, Bombay, Bethlehem, Moscow, Havana, Rio de Janeiro, and across the U.S. reports from Miami, New Orleans, Tucson, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and in New York, Dick Clark counting down to the new year in Times Square.
Good morning.
FBI agents are heading to Saudi Arabia to investigate the deadly terrorist attacks there as the State Department orders non-essential diplomats out of the country today, Wednesday, May the 14th, 2003.
From NBC News, this is Today with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer, live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
And welcome to Today on this Wednesday morning, everyone. I'm Katie Couric.
And I'm Matt Lauer. The death toll in those attacks has been rising. More than 24 people were killed, including...
This is NBC Nightly News with John Chancellor in New York.
Good evening. President Reagan today promised again that...
From ABC News. With David Brinkley. Now from our Washington headquarters, substituting for David Brinkley, here's Sam Donaldson.
Well, here we go into the 90s, ready or not. And whether...
Good morning again. It's 1:30, and this is Today. And in this half hour, Dr. Murray Feingold of the...
Investigating the alleged plane terror plot find a suitcase which appears to contain bomb-making equipment. The BBC has learnt it was discovered as police search woodland in High Wycombe. Another terror alert in the United States. An airport in West Virginia is evacuated as suspect explosives are found. A woman passenger is being interviewed now. We'll bring you the latest on this developing story. Also tonight, Lebanon moves its troops into the south, but the world seems unwilling to risk many of its troops with them.
So a quantity of syringe packaging in silver foil in the front child's bedroom.
Jailed the mother who turned her 9-year-old son into a heroin and crack addict. And they led the 60s revolution. Now they're turning 60 and are about to reinvent the pensioner.
And on Look North at 10:25, behind bars, the gang of luxury car thieves jailed for stealing over £1 million worth of motors. And forget the teens, an anxious moment for the Yorkshire mums as they get their A-level results.
Good evening. Police investigated the alleged plot to blow up several transatlantic planes.
Welcome, everyone. This is Headline News. I'm Michael Lanos.
And I'm Rudy Bakhtiar. Let's get right to our headlines. Alaska is now the only state left with open polls. The numbers are still rolling in. CNN projects President Bush has clinched a total of 193 electoral votes so far, and Senator John Kerry has 133.
Arab network Al Jazeera says it has obtained a new videotape of a kidnapped relief worker pleading for her life. It says the captors of Margaret Hassan are threatening to hand her over to a group connected to al-Qaeda. The militant group is now demanding that Britain withdraw its troops from Iraq within 48 hours.
And jurors in the Scott Peterson trial are expected to begin deliberations tomorrow. During closing arguments, the defense argued not to decide Peterson's guilt or innocence based on whether they liked him or not. His attorney says the prosecution has portrayed him as a, quote, liar, but not a guilty man.
Well, the polls have closed in 5 states, and CNN has just projected...
Desert Storm rolls north through Kuwait and into Iraq, well ahead of schedule and expectations.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. Tonight, America at war. Reporting from Saudi Arabia, Tom Brokaw with Garrick Utley in New York.
Good evening. It is one of the largest military operations in modern history, and if the early patterns hold,
中電利潤急升，但係就冇講會唔會凍結加電費。淺水灣再發現紅潮品種同上次嘅唔同。立法會選舉截止提名，總共收到120份嘅名單。新聞嘅詳細內容，中電控股喺過去半年嘅利潤上升超過8成半，達到48億幾。
Baghdad, allies launch 500 cruise missiles in a day.
The commander of the invasion warns we're using munitions on a scale never seen before.
Under cover of night, Allied forces head north towards Baghdad.
And up in smoke, oil wells are ablaze.
Sky News with Chris Roberts and Kay Burley.
Hello, good evening to you. Large explosion.
This is TVS.
A new British passport for 200,000 in Hong Kong. Hundreds may have died as Romania's Ceausescu stamps on protest. Gorbachev praises dissident Sakharov and comforts his widow. 5 die in helicopter crash as a party ends in tragedy. And the baby who shouldn't have made it does in time for Christmas. Good evening. The government intends to go ahead.
Guten Abend, verehrte Zuschauer. Präsident Reagan hat mehreren westlichen Partnern...
Hier ist das erste deutsche Fernsehen mit der Tagesschau.
Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Die Gesundheitsreform ein zentral...
Hier ist das deutsche Fernsehen mit der Tagesschau. Anschließend die Wetterkarte. Guten Abend. In Bangkok ist heute...
Здравствуйте, в эфире «Время», в студии Екатерина Андреева, и сегодня в программе «Марш победителей». По Красной площади снова, как и 63 года назад, прошли участники легендарного парада 41 года. А на других площадях люди вышли на митинги, посвященные Дню примирения и согласия. Война в Кот-д'Ивуаре. В стране идут столкновения между правительственными войсками, демонстрантами и французскими миротворцами. Толпы мародеров громят французские магазины и лицеи. Париж перебрасывает в Кот-д'Ивуар дополнительные силы. Катастрофа в Великобритании. К западу от Лондона пассажирский поезд столкнулся с автомобилем. Все вагоны сошли с рельсов и опрокинулись. 6 человек погибли, десятки ранены. Константин Дзю отстоял титул чемпиона мира. Российский боксер в блестящем стиле выиграл бой, послав своего соперника в нокаут. Корова, которая умеет считать до 10. Родители рижских школьников ставят цирковую артистку Литу в пример своим детям. Сегодня по брусчатке Красной площади.
Action News 15 on WLYH-TV with Larry Menti, Lee Furco, and the entire Action News 15 team. The Pennsylvania Heartland's most comprehensive coverage of local news. Here's Larry Menti.
Good evening. Thursday night, and a dozen anti-nuclear protests.
This is Dan Rather, CBS News in New York.
Good evening. Fairchild Air Force Base opened...
Decision 92, the final primaries. From New York, here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening.
From our exclusive satellite coverage of major international news, this is The World Tonight.
Amin Gemayel gets White House support for the removal of all foreign forces from Lebanon. Qantas and British Airways, two airlines with financial problems. Japan's politicians still divided over a successor to Zenko Suzuki. Lebanese President Amin Gemayel is on his way to Europe tonight.
We interrupt our regular program schedule to bring you a special report from ABC News.
I'm Ted Koppel. There has been a rather strong earthquake in Northern California, so strong, in fact, that it has, among other things, knocked...
World record gold for Queenslander Duncan Armstrong. Herbert says lying comes naturally to policemen. And phone tapping laws to be extended in Queensland. Good evening, Rod Young with National News. In other headlines...
Your #1 news station. News for tonight at 10.
Good evening, I'm Elizabeth Kay. A Southside house fire has claimed...
And now, a Fox News Extra.
Good evening. In tonight's headlines, in Brownsville, Texas, they call...
Good evening, everyone. I'm Terry's on Bob.
Now, you can get an insider's view of Houston's news, plus a better understanding of how it affects you on Insider Reports. Weeknights at 10, only on 2 News, Houston's 24-hour news channel.
Good morning. Amid mounting pressure from conservatives, President Clinton has withdrawn his nomination of Lani Guinier to head up the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. Claiming Guinier's writings lent themselves to views that he could not embrace, the president cut her loose rather than fight a divisive battle on Capitol Hill. For her part, Guinier has had no comment, but will this morning exclusively on Today, Friday, June the 4th, 1993.
From NBC News, this is Today with Bryant Gumbel and Catherine Currick.
And good morning. Welcome to Today on a busy Friday morning. You know what our top story is. We're all over it this morning. Lani Guinier is in our Washington News.
For the third time in just 28 months, the body of a Kremlin leader lies in state in Moscow's ornate House of Unions. Konstantin Chernenko is dead at the age of 73. And with a speed unmatched in recent history, Mikhail Gorbachev is named the successor at 54, the leader of a new post-war Soviet generation. Good evening, this is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Konstantin Chernenko was the oldest man ever to have...
The Senate's budget blockade sparks fears of interest rate rises. Aborigines claim they've been sold out over Mabo. And Wayne Rainey talks of rebuilding his life after his terrible accident.
From National 9 News, this is Nightline with Jim Whaley.
Good evening. Last night's Senate rejection of key tax bills has...
This is 7 News Late Edition with Naomi Robson.
Soviet Foreign Minister Eduard Shevardnadze stuns his leader by announcing his resignation and warning of a looming dictatorship.
And back home, the Chelmsford Hospital report lifts the veil on the darkest chapter in the history of psychiatry in this country. Good evening. And the shock...
A fifth arrest now in the World Trade Center bombing case.
A national restaurant chain is hit with accusations of serving different meals to blacks. One teenager allegedly is refused what is advertised as a free birthday meal.
You have to have lived it to know how I feel. It hurts. And I still get so emotional about it, especially this happening to my daughter on her 13th birthday, her first day as a teenager.
In South Central Los Angeles, moving out is not an option for insiders. And moving in, not much of a consideration for outsiders.
We'll go into Alaska by bridge from Siberia to find out what archaeologists say is an amazing discovery.
And this is decision day for Bo Jackson. Is it a go for the upcoming Major League Baseball season? Stay with us and find out.
This is CNN Morning News. 90 minutes of news, interviews, and viewer phone calls with Bob Kane and Donna Kelly at the CNN Center in Atlanta.
And coming up later on Morning News, we will put questions about Russia, what continues to unfold there, to a...
At 10 o'clock with Peter Sissons and Martin Henfield.
Michael Portillo is sensationally knocked out of the Tory leadership race. Kenneth Clarke now relishes a fight with right-winger Ian Duncan-Smith. Defeated by one vote, a shocked Portillo quits frontline politics. Concord draws back, testing the changes forced by the Air France crash. George Bush tells the BBC there's no stopping his plans for missile defense.
In the Northwest, there's strong support for proposed new gaming laws that could turn Blackpool into a Lancashire Las Vegas. And corporate manslaughter charges after a boy is killed by a truck reversing from a factory yard.
Good evening. One vote today and...
Grief and horror at death of Diana, Princess of Wales. The body of Princess Diana is brought back to Britain. And in sports news, Mayo beat Offaly to face Kerry in All-Ireland final. Good evening.
With the latest news from the CNN Airport Network.
This is a special edition of 10 News with George Danikian.
Diana, Princess of Wales, has died after a car crash in Paris.
Tonight, the death of Diana, the Princess of Wales, killed in a high-speed paparazzi car chase.
It is a very tragic and untimely accident.
Anguish, disbelief and despair as the Paris tragedy plunges the world into mourning. Good evening. The tragic news of the young princess's death has stunned and distressed the world.
In Washington, a landmark decision from the Supreme Court against physician-assisted suicide. In outer space, heat and darkness for the crew aboard the Mir space station as they struggle to regain power. And in sports, Mike Tyson weighs in for his rematch with Evander Holyfield. It's Friday, June 27, 1997.
This is NBC News at Sunrise with Linda Bester.
Good morning, everyone. Well, the Supreme Court ruling was unanimous, but right-to-die advocates, including Dr.
Live from the news leader in Northern California, First 4 News. Here's the very latest.
Still reeling from a devastating fire, an entire city is now almost underwater. 50,000 people told to get out with whatever they can carry. Hello, I'm Wendy Takuda.
And I'm Pam Moore. Our first story this Monday, the devastation in...
This is WRAL-TV 5, Raleigh-Durham, Fayetteville. From North Carolina's news leader, this is the 6 o'clock news with Charlie Gaddy, Pam Salisbury, meteorologist Greg Fischel, and Tom Suter with sports. This is WRAL-TV 5 News.
Good evening. A severe thunderstorm warning is in effect.
Tonight, mourning Maurice Richard.
We are losing a very big man.
Tears and tributes for a hockey legend. The Walkerton crisis, is the worst over? A town prays for answers. And final salute for an unknown soldier. A grateful nation honors its fallen heroes.
CTV News with Sandy Rinaldo.
Good evening. The Montreal Canadiens.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings in London, Max Robinson in New York, and from ABC News Election Headquarters in New York, Frank Reynolds.
Good evening. November 4th, a day to remember. On this date in 1979, American citizens became...
Decision 80. NBC News reports the results of our national election. From the NBC News Election Center in New York, here are Tom Brokaw and John Chancellor.
Good evening and welcome to NBC News' coverage of the 1980 presidential election. Our team...
Israel is at flashpoint tonight. Another day of protest and shooting. A key Coast Guard installation, site of widespread drug corruption. More to come. And a recommendation to bring the wolves back to Yellowstone.
NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. The weekend massacre of 7 Palestinians by an Israeli man.
Jesse Jackson rejects a compromise over the expulsion of 7 students in Illinois. A watershed in managed health care, and HMO lets doctors decide. And local programming may soon be coming to a satellite dish near you. This is the CBS Morning News for Tuesday, November 9th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Julie Chen. The Reverend Jesse Jackson plans to lead a march in
Assalamualaikum. Sari berita utama. Malaysia meninjau kemungkinan melibatkan diri dalam pelaburan 3 pihak di Meksiko untuk menembusi pasaran Amerika. Mesyuarat para Menteri Kewangan Commonwealth bulan depan dijangka menumpukan kepada 2 isu utama. Kementerian Perdagangan Antarabangsa dan Industri melonggarkan dasar import motosikal yang siap dipasang.
Malaysia sedang meninjau kemungkinan melibatkan diri dalam
Zapfenstreich, Pannenminister Stoltenberg räumt das Feld. Geniestreich, das schweigende Lämmer heimst 5 Oscars ein. Schelmenstreich, Fälscherkönig Kujau schlägt wieder zu. Heute Abend im Nachrichtenstudio von RTL Aktuell Brigitte Reimann, Andreas Dieck und Peter Klöppel.
Guten Abend, herzlich willkommen zu RTL Aktuell. Gestern noch...
Polemik und Politik. Regierung und Opposition streiten im Bundestag über den richtigen Umgangston. Gift aus der Pfanne. Wie hoch ist die Krebsgefahr von Bratkartoffeln, Pommes oder Chips? Schattenspiel am Himmel. Eine totale Sonnenfinsternis begeistert Zehntausende in Afrika und Australien. Das Wetter: viele Wolken, in den Bergen Süddeutschlands Schnee, 0 bis 7 Grad.
Die Nachrichten des Tages. Heute mit Klaus Seidel.
Verehrte Zuschauer, guten Abend. Sie haben sich nichts geschenkt heute.
We are canceling all our regular programs for the next 8 hours so that ABC News can bring you full coverage of the 1972 elections. ABC News presents complete nationwide coverage of tonight's Election 72. Brought to you by J.C. Penney. Tomorrow morning, our 1,700 stores and our catalog will be waiting to help you find what you're looking for. Now, from election headquarters in New York, the anchormen of the ABC Evening News, Harry Reisner and Howard K. Smith.
Good evening. Well, at last, the long wait is over. Tonight, we find...
In the grip of civil war, the Defense Secretary John Reid tells ITV News that Iraq is not out of control. He was quick to reject the crisis claims by the country's former Prime Minister. Tonight, we report from Iraq on the 3rd anniversary of the invasion. Also tonight, loans for lordships. Can Tony Blair hold off the vultures amid a storm of accusations over sleaze? And ugly scenes at the West London derby as Chelsea lose their way against Fulham. Good evening. 3 years ago tonight, the combined might of the British and American armed forces was poised to unleash its overwhelming firepower on Saddam.
Brett Huntley. David Brady. John Chanson. More troops. The U.S. to raise troop levels in Iraq by almost 12,000 as violence threatens next month's elections. Scandal, fraud, and corruption in the UN oil for food program in Iraq. Now a demand from a U.S. senator that Kofi Annan, the UN Secretary General, resign. Credit warning. Free credit reports online, but beware what may come with the package. And Ward 57. Home to some of America's bravest soldiers who have to learn how to live all over again.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. The American military investment in Iraq is going up from 138,000 troops there now to 150,000. And the Iraqi election.
A stunning and cowardly strike on the United States. Terrorists send mighty skyscrapers crumbling to the ground. Many innocent people are dead. The president vows the killers will pay for this attack on America. September 11th, 2001. You will remember this day as long as you live. Good evening again. This is CBS News continuing coverage of the attack on America. A series...
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
One, then a second hijacked plane destroyed the buildings where thousands work. Over 100 stories high, the Twin Towers came down in clouds of smoke and fire. In Washington, the Pentagon itself came under attack from a third hijacked plane. Good evening and welcome. The United States is this evening trying...
Attack on America. The day after, the smoke begins to clear. A breakthrough. NBC's terrorism task force with new information on who did this and why. The president's press secretary says the White House and Air Force One were missed targets. A day of desperate rescues, profound sadness, and moments of astonishing kindness.
Attack on America. This is a special edition of NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Tonight, another major section of New York City's World Trade Center is in danger of collapsing as the United States is marshaling forces for a war against terrorism. President Bush tonight visiting the Pentagon.
Eyewitness News, San Antonio's top-rated satellite newscast.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Residents along the Medio Creek in the southwest part of the city remain baffled this evening as to what is...
Action News Tonight with John McKnight, Jill Becker, meteorologist Bob Richards, and Steve Buckhands with sports.
Good evening. It will be a long night for members of the East Point Fire Department. Firefighters are on the scene.
From 41 News Central, this is the late edition, a complete and comprehensive look at the day's news, sports, and weather.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Stoller. Macon Mayor George Israel.
Television 5 Atlanta, WAGA-TV, a service of the Storer Broadcasting Company. Panorama News, compiled and produced by the Channel 5 News Department. Here is your anchorman, Jim Axel.
Good evening. The Georgia Senate makes modern-day history by approving a congressional redistricting proposal. The bitterly debated bill now faces a tough test in the House. The full story coming up.
Jim Axel and Panorama News is presented each evening by Nally Chevrolet, 2555 Stewart Avenue, Southwest.
The Georgia Senate has sent to the House a bill that would realign Georgia's
23rd, 1994. It's the moment we hope will never come, the moment we depend on an ambulance to save our life. Tonight, the dangerous delay that devastated the life of a child and her family.
Dedicated, determined, dependable. This is Channel 5 Eyewitness News at 6.
Good evening. I'm Brenda Wood.
And I'm John Marler. We begin tonight with the results of a 3-month I-Team.
Now, coverage you can count on. Channel 2 Action News at 6.
The sights and sounds of July 4th, 1994, as thousands brave the rain to enjoy the Salute to America parade downtown.
The holiday is a quiet one at area lakes. The rain put a damper on the festivities for thousands of Georgians.
But the holiday festivities are marred with tragedy in Douglasville. A 10-year-old girl dies after being run over by a train. The fatal train accident is our top story on Action News at 6. Good afternoon. I'm Monica Kaufman.
And I'm John Pruitt. Lisa Queen of Lithia Springs was hit by the train as she walked across the track.
Now the 6 o'clock news with Martin Lewis and Jenny Bond.
The BBC television presenter Jill Dando has been murdered outside her London home. She was taken to hospital with severe head injuries and died shortly afterwards. Police say her attacker was a well-dressed white man in his late 30s or early 40s. 2 other headlines: NATO destroys the last bridge over the Danube and claims the Yugoslav government is cracking. And members of the Bradford and Bingley Building Society vote to take the money and become a bank. Good evening. One of Britain's most popular television...
The Holborn tube crash, a live report. Survivors talk of miraculous escapes. Volunteer bailiffs, Union Block Council plan, and bargains on wheels. We report on new cars at any price. But first, our report on that lucky escape beneath the...
From NBC News election headquarters in New York, Decision 96, Election Night. Here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening, and if the current trends hold, this will be a triumphant night for the 50-year-old.
I'm Peter Jennings at ABC News headquarters. We have...
Live from the studios of 7 Melbourne, Peter Mitchell with 7 News.
Tonight, Kylie Minogue confirms she has breast cancer and scraps her Australian tour to battle the disease.
Just shattering, and everyone's got to have their fingers crossed.
Fears of a commuter backlash over proposed taxi fare increases. And the husband of murder victim Jane Thurgood Dove now locked in a bitter building dispute. Good evening. Also coming up, the next step as the 7 and 10 network.
This is CNN Headline News. You're in tune with the world.
GM's auto workers say yes. Good morning, I'm Jane Acree. A new contract between the United Auto Workers.
This is Eyewitness News with Roger Grimsby and Bill Butel, plus Spencer Christian, Storm Field, and the Eyewitness News team.
Good evening, I'm Roger Grimsby. Here now the news. Actor Rock Hudson dead.
From WNBC TV in New York, this is Live at 5 with Jack Cafferty, Sue Simmons, and Al Roker with the weather.
Good evening. A black teenager is shot to death in what police say was a racially...
From North Carolina's News Center, this is Eyewitness News at 6 with Bob Hughes, Beverly Burke, Don Shea, and Cheryl Tony.
Good evening, I'm Beverly Burke.
I'm Bob Hughes. Well, we're obviously not in our familiar surroundings.
No, we are